Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to bury Michigan all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to bury Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Meeechigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast.
Go Blue and welcome to our Michigan Game Day show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Our guest today is the new radio play-by-play voice of Michigan football, Doug Karsch. Before Doug joins us, a few of my thoughts to get us going. It's hard to believe, but the start of another season is here. The question I ask, and I'm sure most of you do too, is can Michigan repeat last year's success? We are ranked 8th to begin the season, and considered by most to be the second best team in the Big Ten. You know who was picked to win it, and we don't need to mention their name. I think this is a huge season for Michigan football for many reasons, and here are just a few. We need to follow up on last year's success and prove it was not a fluke. We need to beat Michigan State and Penn State at home. We need to prove once again we can go on the road in a tough environment like the one we'll face on Week 5 in Iowa and win. Then if all goes to script, having the opportunity to meet Ohio State in Columbus on that last Saturday in November with everything on the line and beating them in the shoe. That would be so sweet. Can we accomplish all of that and more? We will start getting some answers this Saturday in the Big House at 12 noon. My guest today is no stranger to Michigan fans or sports radio listeners in the Detroit market. He has been on the air for almost 20 years at WXYT 97.1 The Ticket in Detroit. He has co-hosted Michigan's pre- and post-game shows and has been the radio sideline reporter for 16 years on the network. This week will be different for him. From now on, he'll be high above the fans with John Jansen in the radio booth, calling the play-by-play action of the team he has watched and covered since childhood. It will be a dream come true for Doug Karsch. We taped this interview while Doug was driving to Ann Arbor for practice, so the audio is not pristine, but it gets better after the first few minutes. Doug Karsch joins us next on this week's Michigan Game Day show, so stay with us. Here with us on our Game Day segment as we preview the big opener against Colorado State on Saturday is Michigan radio play-by-play voice, Doug Karsch. Great to have you with us, Doug.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, Doug, you're no stranger, of course, to those of us in the Detroit market. A lot of my listeners are outside of that market. I'm sure they've heard you as the sideline guy in the network for many years. But being up there in the booth calling the action this Saturday with John Jansen, that is going to be just quite the thrill, isn't it?
I'm pretty excited about it. It's been an absolute pleasure being on the field for all those games for 16 years. The pregame show has been built up into quite a monster and 3 hours long, and I just love doing it. Everything about it was fun, and I'm actually going to miss it. Other people that are going to be involved in the pregame show now, and certainly you can't do play-by-play from the field, but it always felt like you were right in the middle of it. Yet this is a great opportunity, and I'm really fired up. I mean, to be up there on a game day, pregame is stadium filled up. We'd get in there and be on the air at 9 a.m. and the stadium was empty. And you'd slowly see personnel start coming in, and then the teams would arrive, and the opponent would walk down the tunnel in their sweatsuits, and they'd go through throwing the ball around, and the managers would be out there, and then the teams would put on their pants and come out in shells with no shoulder pads, and then they'd announce the stadium gates were open and people would start trickling it in. It was just such a thrill. It was really felt like you were at the center of all the excitement. But now to be up there once the game starts, and the stands are full, looking down on a full stadium with college football, Michigan football going on, it's just great. I can't wait to bring the excitement and do the best that I can to convey that over the air.
Well, I was thinking this morning, I go back to the 60s when I started coming of age listening to Michigan football. So, of course, that meant Bobby Ufer. And then we had Frank Beckman, then Jim Brandstatter, now Doug Karsch. And it has to truly be an honor to be mentioned in your name with those great radio guys, isn't it?
Right. It's funny. People ask me, am I nervous? And I don't get nervous until people bring up stuff like that. Wow. But yes, it's unbelievable. I mean, I'm a kid from Section 17, row 80, seats 30 or 31. That's where I grew up watching Michigan football in the 70s and 80s. And my dad was a professor in Michigan and moved to Ann Arbor when I was 4 and started going to games when I was 7. I've been watching and paying attention closely ever since. And it's just an unbelievable thrill and honor, and very excited about it. Seems surreal. A lot of it is right place, right time. And I take the responsibility very seriously.
Well, it will be fun Saturday to listen to you and John, and great to get the college football season kicked off too, Doug. And let's start with the question I think every Michigan fan has been asking or talking about since Saturday. Jim unveiled his quarterback plans for the first 2 games. We'll see Cade this week against Colorado State, JJ next week against Hawaii. Did that decision in any way surprise you?
Well, it shouldn't, because Jim's his own man, his own coach. He doesn't do things conventionally, whether it be satellite camps or sleepovers with recruits, or, for a while there, one of the first to have his own podcast. He was very active on social media. All those things rattled cages, and now all coaches seem to be very active on social media. Although, ironically, Jim's gone the other direction with that. Things in college football are changing so rapidly that the idea that head coaches are going to operate in a conventional fashion is ridiculous. They are responding to the times. And, if this have anything to do with the ease of a quarterback entering the transfer portal, it might. And should it? It might. He's playing the odds here a little bit that who he starts at quarterback shouldn't matter for several games. And it seems like a relatively safe assumption. So why would it matter? Why would you not change with the time? And I think that Jim Harbaugh is, he's at the forefront of the transfer portal. He said he wanted to allow for his players to be able to transfer without sitting out. And now he might be massaging the roster a little bit to try and, keep both his guys happy so he doesn't lose one or the other. In the meantime, it comes at very little risk. Now, when push comes to shove, we'll find out about his quarterback rotation. But with the way things are rapidly changing in college football, I think it's foolish to expect a coach to act conventionally, because conventions have to change. There was a while there when a player entered the transfer portal, it meant there was something wrong with the program. So, when a player transferred and had to sit out, there had to be something wrong with the program or something wrong with the kid. Well, that's not the case at all anymore. So, NIL has changed things, and players get recruited off your roster.
Mm-hmm.
So, changing with the times is only smart.
I agree. I mean, he is changing with the times. It's fascinating. Last year we had sort of a preview of this in some ways with both of them sharing time. But, Saturday Jim also mentioned that it wouldn't be improbable if this went on past 2 games. Do you think you get to a point where maybe it's not a good thing?
Well, I guess if they're losing football games, he makes the wrong decision. Maybe it could underrode the leadership of the position, undermine it, erode it. I combined those together. But it could You know what I'm saying? Like, it could be a problem long term in that regard, but you have to know your roster too, right? You have to know, is Cade McNamara comfortable continuing to compete? Is J.J. McCarthy comfortable continuing to compete? And if those guys are comfortable continuing to compete, then it really shouldn't be an issue. You know, I don't sense any divisiveness yet. I'll be around the team more in coming weeks, in which case that may change. But I think right now they've got a healthy situation. There's probably 10, 12 guys on the roster that are also battling for their positions, that are probably concerned about their own battles and not worried about what's going on elsewhere. And then there's guys that are settled into their roles. But, you know, I don't think Tom Brady is where he is today if he didn't have to compete with Drew Henson from day one.
Right.
And have to compete with Brian Greasy before that. Tom Brady thought he should have been the starting quarterback in '97, but he used it to his advantage, and many people do. And, you know, if you compete, it brings out your best, then, you know, it's only good for you, right?
That's right. And we'll all watch that competition the first few games or longer. But one thing we do know is whoever is under center this year has a loaded toolbox to work with. And that starts up front with that O-line. And this is another very, very talented group, isn't it, Doug?
It is. And I mean, if we went through an era, through probably in the Rich Rod era, and that echoed for a few years, where they had some good linemen, but they did not have good line. And it's, you know, last year to have a group win the Joe Moore Award, and, you know, there has been some speculation that this group could be better. You don't know until you are out there and facing live competition, but Olu Oluwatini is a great addition. Another year in the weight room for Zach Zinner and for Ryan Hayes, Trente Jones, you know, to get bigger and stronger. You don't know about chemistry and communication and how guys are going to play off one another until you get into games sometimes. But I think it looks like an incredibly healthy situation right now up front.
And another great situation is that receiver room. I think going back again to my days, starting watching Michigan football in the 60s, I can't remember a deeper and what we think is more talented receiver group. It is just unbelievable, isn't it?
Well, it is. I think there might be ones that I might think of as more talented. This group has no returning All Big Ten performers. You're not seeing anybody get All-American preseason mention, but it does feel like they've got minimum six weapons that are all equally dangerous. You have budding freshmen that might be more talented than some of the upperclassmen, but you don't have, I mean, it's a pretty remarkable statistic that Jim Harbaugh has 0 first-team Big Ten receiver selections in his time at Michigan. But there's been some good guys that have come through. You know, Donovan Peoples-Jones and Nico Collins, and now with this group with Ronnie Bell and Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson and Andrell Anthony. I mean, it's talented, but I think if I were coaching in that wide receiver room, I'd have all over the bulletin board how everybody talks about Ohio State's talent. Everybody talks about Jaden Reed up at Michigan State, but what do they say about Michigan's group? They say they're good, but they're not being counted amongst the elites in the country, let alone their own conference. So I'd be playing that card big time because I do think they have that kind of potential. But I guess we'll find out starting Saturday how good they can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And the running back situation, let's talk about that for a minute. Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, there might be more dynamic duo in college football, but they'd be hard to find, wouldn't they?
Yeah, pretty good. Blake Corum is a weight room warrior and a guy that'll get the most out of whatever physical skills he has, and he's shifty in the hole and can make you miss, and he's got great speed. And Donovan Edwards is, I don't think I wouldn't put him in the category of Tyrone Wheatley, but I'd say he's the most Tyrone Wheatley-esque running back they've had since Tyrone Wheatley with size and speed. And heck, you can throw the ball too, huh? We learned that.
Yeah.
So very impressed with him. And boy, do they seem to love C.J. Stokes. He's a bit of an unheralded recruit, 3-star out of South Carolina. But it seems like every time there's an update, there's more talk about him rapidly moving up the depth chart. Now, it's interesting that Fred Jackson's back on the staff and helping out Mike Hart, because Freddie used to talk to me all the time about how there was so much more to running back than just your ability to run the football. And it sounds like that's where C.J. Stokes has got to learn quickly. But, you'd like to have 3 guys, and it sounds like Stokes is pushing Javier Dunlap for that third running back spot. And it's a matter of how quickly he develops as a blocker and how quickly he develops as a pass catcher out of the backfield. And if those things come along as quickly as they think they might, then he could be that third guy.
Well, we can feel good about that running back room. Another two guys I don't want to forget about are our tight ends, Schoonmaker and All. Both of those guys, you hear a lot of people say they're both considered NFL caliber. I'm not sure about that, but I'll tell you what, those dudes can block, can't they?
Yeah, well, Eric Hall did the borderline unthinkable, and that is come in as a true freshman, as a tight end, and make an impact as a blocker more than a receiver. Yeah. I mean, they loved his ability to block from day one, and that doesn't happen with true freshmen. He has always had that skill set. And then his ability to catch the ball, had some dropsies early in his second year. Those are well in the past, and it sounded like something he needed to go through to get the most out of his receiving ability, and he has now. And I think if you want to overhype Eric Hall, I'm not going to stop you, because I think Eric Hall has the makings of being an All-American tight end. And two plays stood out. One was the Penn State play. Two things stood out. One was the Penn State play. The end of that game, he said he put his hand in the dirt, looked at the defense, and he knew immediately that this could be a big play based on the coverage they were looking at. And not only was it a big play, he ran away from defenders on a bad ankle. Mm-hmm. The other thing that was interesting was Eric Hall was an early entry candidate last year. People were talking about him going to the NFL. And he walked out of the locker room after the Orange Bowl, and I had post-game interviews to do, and he was one of the players I talked to. And before I could say anything, I said, this is obviously disappointing. And he goes, disappointing loss. And he said, I can't wait to get back to practice and get ready for next year. I want to start practice tomorrow, and I'm going to try and get guys working out right away. And that caught me off guard, because we thought he had a decision to make. Mm-hmm. Well, he didn't. He wanted to come back, and he wanted to make another run at it. And it sounded like his commitment to do so was so, he had such intent to do so, that from moment one, as soon as that Orange Bowl was over, he was thinking about next year. And I'll be interested to see what kind of player they've got in number 83, because I think he could be one of they've had a lot of great tight ends, and I think he could be looking at one of the best seasons the Michigan tight end has had.
Over on the other side of the ball, Doug, interested to see what Coach Mitter has for the defense. I know that schematically things are supposed to be the same as they were last year under Coach McDonald, but we all know who we lost on that defense. But still, there's plenty of talent for a coach to work with, isn't there?
So, yeah, and we're hearing that this defense might be faster than last year's defense, which would be great news for Michigan fans. When you are in a playbook for over a year, and that's the benefit of bringing in Jesse Minter, who cut his teeth at the Ravens at the same time Mike McDonald did, and believes in many of the same things and concepts, is you're thinking less and you're reacting instinctively more. And that apparently is what they're getting with Jesse Minter, is nothing really has changed. And so the players aren't having to think, they're just going out and playing. It appears to have impacted this team in a positive way in terms of their ability to play fast. So just something to watch, something to pay attention to, and see if this defense truly is faster than last year's, which I'm a little bit believe it when I see it, but I'm looking forward to seeing if it's true.
Well, this Saturday, Colorado State comes to town for a visit in the opener. Coach Jay Norvell is in his first year at the helm there in Fort Collins, comes from Nevada, and brings with him that air raid offense that people out west love to watch and love to talk about. And I guess they throw the ball about 60% of the time. They just sling it around the field a lot, don't they, Doug?
Yeah, and not only did he bring his air raid offense, he brought, it felt like half his roster from Nevada, and half his coaching staff from Nevada. Peculiar in-conference coaching switch. You don't see that every day. And there's 59 new players on this roster. 59. I mean, that's makes it a kind of a difficult scout. Their quarterback, Clay Millen, is a former four-star who lost most of his senior season to COVID, but his junior year, and this was a stat that jumped off the page, his junior year in high school, he threw 34 touchdowns to 1 interception. And that's a pretty amazing ratio. They brought one of the better receivers. Romeo Dubs was their best receiver. last year in Nevada, but they brought one of their better receivers with them, and probably the most talented receiver. Colorado State is back. They lost a big tight end in Trey McBride, but 4 transfers are going to start on their offensive line. Hard team to know what to get. I imagine they'll go through some growing pains in this day and age of quick fixes in college football because of the transfer portal. It'll be an interesting challenge, but ultimately, I would imagine that Michigan has too much. But Jay Norvell is a pretty well-respected coach, and we'll see what they're bringing to the table. But not a lot of experience in the quarterback position, so it'll be a tough task going up against the Michigan defense. Well, they lost a lot, still are bringing back a lot. They have an extraordinarily talented secondary, and up front, it's going to be intriguing to see. It feels like there's some wild cards there. Like, what are they going to get out of Mozzie Smith with the push from the middle? And is Julius Welshoff going to be the freak that, he ended up on that same freak list as Mozzie Smith? Yavi Anova, how quickly is he going to pick up the offense? There's talented players that are unproven, Chris Jenkins and Braden McGregor. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays itself out.
Well, final question before we let you get away, Doug. Right now, we have not seen one snap from this Michigan team. Of course, this is a tough question, but given what we know or what we think we know right now, how good do you think this team can be?
I think they can be as good as last year's team. Offensively, they could be better. All right, offensively, they probably should be better. You always worry about what a team lost, but the addition of Olu Oluwatimi at center, all the returners at receiver, the experience at quarterback, they're going to have to replace the toughness and short yardage and the all-around ability of Hassan Hafkin, but there's talented players there to do so. Defensively, we'll see. They'll a lot to prove. Junior Colson looks like he could be extremely talented in the middle of that Michigan defense, but there are some questions. They lost arguably their 2 best pass rushers, the best linebacker, and the most talented guy in the secondary. I think there'll be a better defense than Ohio State's was last year, but this might be a Michigan season that mimics Ohio State, where they have to go to the old cliche of outscoring people. Translation, they might win some games 38-28 or 45-31. They've got everything there to make another run at the Big Ten title. I think it's a fair expectation for them to go to Columbus with a chance to win the East and a chance to play for the Big Ten championship and a chance to make the playoff. And at this point, that's kind of where my predictions lie. That's as far as I'll take it. And we'll see about Ohio State, but I think the idea of them going to Columbus with a chance to meet expectations from last year, I think is fair.
With us today in our Michigan Game Day segment has been the radio play-by-play voice of our Wolverines, Doug Karsch. Thanks for taking the time to be with us, Doug. And like many Michigan fans, I'm excited to hear you call the games this year and hope we can get you back in the near future.
Yep, no problem. Look forward to it. Working with John's been great all these years on the pregame show, and he's a natural in the booth. Left the Big Ten Network for that job someday, and good for him. He's just a great guy, and I can see why he's one of Lloyd Carr's most beloved players. And the star of the broadcast is the team, and the co-star, the supporting actor, is John Jansen, and I will narrate the action and look forward to it.
And we look forward to hearing you, Doug. Again, thanks for taking the time to be with us.
No problem.
On Quick Hits today, on Monday, Jim Harbaugh credited his strength and conditioning staff for a great job that they did with off-season training. He said his guys have been going all out in camp, and there have been very few injuries. The only one he mentioned was a soft tissue injury linebacker Nakai Hill-Green was fighting through. Jim said he still might play on Saturday, but that might be a game-time decision. Here are a few game day notes of interest for you. Michigan and Colorado State have met only once. We were 24-10 winners over them in the 1994 Holiday Bowl. Head coach Jay Norvell is in his first year as head man in Fort Collins. He spent the last 5 years at Nevada and compiled a record of 33 wins against 26 losses. Last year, the Rams finished 2-6 in the Mountain West, 3-9 overall. They have 3 starters returning on offense, 5 on defense. Of the 85 scholarship players on this roster, 59 of them are first year. Their last bowl appearance was in the 2017 New Mexico Bowl. They lost to Marshall 31-28. Kickoff is at 12 noon on Saturday, and the game will be carried by ABC. Now, the weatherman says it should be mostly sunny at kickoff with scattered thunderstorms developing late afternoon. Chance of rain is 40%. In Michigan, we know this. Advanced weather forecasts are nice, but the weather can change on a dime. But all in all, a pretty nice forecast for the opener if it holds up. I, for one, cannot wait to get this thing underway. I'm nervous about every game, though, and this will be no exception. Everyone that knows anything about college football seems to be thinking we're going to rout Colorado State. And I always remember what Bob Ufer used to say every week, because it's still true. On paper, Michigan is the big favorite on Saturday. The bad news is, we won't be playing the game on paper. Jay Norvell is a good head coach, and you have to respect your opposition. And scouting a team like this with all of these new players, it's next to impossible. But I love openers, and I have great vibes about this Michigan team. So let's get this thing kicked off and play some ball. Next week, Hawaii will be making a trip to Ann Arbor. You can be sure they're not thrilled about a night game, but it is what it is. My guest on our visitors segment Tuesday will be the radio play-by-play voice of the Rainbows, John Veneri. On Thursday, we'll hear from the angel of the big house, Michigan beat writer Angelique Shengelis from the Detroit News. So make sure you join us. That will do it for another week. Enjoy the opener, everyone. It should be a lot of fun. And make sure you come back next week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. Think victory. Beat Colorado State. And until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!